Last summer, I wanted to take Winnipeg to make the playoffs. I held off. I was like, nah, probably not going to make it this year. Because they went and got Steve Mason, and the idea was Mason would probably split starts with Hellebuck. Hellebuck did not have a great season in 2016-17. The team only had 87 points, and I thought, even if they improved by 4 or 5 points, I don't know if that gets them in the playoffs. And I chickened out. And then they produced 114 points this past year, and I look like a fool for not sticking my neck out. Now, this was the third time this team made the playoffs in 18 seasons. So when Jets fans talk about, well, people should just have faith in us, this is part of the reason why, though, because the franchise from Atlanta over into Winnipeg, and this is the former Atlanta franchise, it hasn't been a winning franchise. Now, this is Paul Maurice's fifth full season. This is Kevin Cheveldayoff still running the team as GM. Cheveldayoff's been very, very patient, and finally that patience was rewarded this season. And they got close. And then they got Vegas. They did. They got Vegas. And no shame to these guys for that happening because it happened to the West. Uh, but yeah, 114 points, 87 the year before, 78 the year before, 99 in 2014-15, and 84 the year before that. This was the first year they won a game in the playoffs. A game. Not just make the playoffs. It's the first time they've won a game in the playoffs. And so they won 2 rounds. So there's now a feeling that the Winnipeg Jets can win one. And by one, I mean the Stanley Cup. And I think it could happen this year. The Hockey News had a future watch. I want to say it was in 2014. I want to say 2014 that they said your 2019 Stanley Cup champions, the Winnipeg Jets. And I looked at that headline, and I'll have to find it. It's in here somewhere. But I looked at that headline, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? This is a joke, right?" And I thought it was hilarious because again, it was 2014. It's right here. Before the teams made the playoffs since going to Winnipeg, and they didn't look like they were getting anywhere close. Up until this past year, they really didn't look like they were getting anywhere close. Even though they had some of the best forwards in the league, and they just drafted this kid that looks like he's going to turn out to be pretty darn good. Uh, Top 5 cap hits: Bufflin, Hellebuck, Scheifele, Ehlers, and Blake Wheeler's a UFA next summer. I look for Cheveldayoff to have him re-signed before the trade deadline. I don't think Wheeler's going anywhere, and I think that's kind of the cap apocalypse that everybody's waiting for, is that all these guys are going to get re-signed. I don't think Wheeler's going to want a ton more money. He can get it. He's definitely earned it with the amount of points he's put up over the last few years. But I don't think for him at this stage, I don't think it'll be the money. I think it's going to be about a chance to win. And he's given an excellent chance to win as a member of the Winnipeg Jets. So the Jets are now in that sweet spot. They've gone from a team nobody wants to go to, that's not going anywhere, and it's the city of Winnipeg, so it's really cold during the winter, and it's not fantastic during the summer either. But now that they're a winning team and they've got a shot at a Stanley Cup, there are players that will look us to take the weather and go, "Who cares about the weather? My family can live wherever, and I can play games in Winnipeg. It'll be fine." They will find reasons to play in Winnipeg as long as they're a Stanley Cup contender. The undesirable location becomes very desirable when that team starts winning. The plus player for me is Patrick Laine. When Laine's on, when Laine's shot is good and he's confident in it, he's one of the best players in the league, one of the best snipers in the league. He can go cold. He can go quiet. And I think with him, I think a lot of it is confidence. Having confidence in his shot. And I think that, honestly, he is due for not just a breakthrough, but like getting into Ovechkin numbers for goals kind of season. I could see him winning the Rocket Richard Trophy this year. Absolutely. But the MVP is Scheifele. Mark Scheifele, I had him at number 6 on my top 20 centers in the league. He is one of the best players in the league. There are a lot of people who don't necessarily watch Winnipeg who will take him lightly, is one way of putting it, or just at the very least take for granted his role with the Winnipeg Jets. But he's fantastic. And when you watch enough Winnipeg Jets games, you realize just how damn good Mark Scheifele really is. Guy, he's fantastic. And he is their MVP. If something happened to him, or they ended up needing to replace him in the lineup, they would have an issue because nobody can replace Scheifele in more ways than one. Minus player, I put Trouba with a question mark because honestly, there aren't any big question marks on this team, other than Trouba wanted more money. He didn't get it. It's a 1-year contract. So there's this uncertainty hanging over how long is Jacob Trouba going to be a member of the Winnipeg Jets? Is it 5 years, or is it just until the trade deadline this year? Is it this year and then next summer he moves? That's the only drawback I can see with this team. And yet he's still one of their top defensemen and will be this coming season as well. Connor, Scheifele, Wheeler, Ehlers, Laine. The only I'm not sure spot is second line center. Little, Roslovic. Jack Roslovic came in and played pretty well, and I think he'll be given a chance to potentially get that second line center spot. If you can get Little down to third line center, then down the middle, the Winnipeg Jets are as good as anybody in the West. But that depends on Roslovic being able to step in and take that role. Because then that puts Lowry down to fourth line center, and Andrew Kopp moves to the wing. And you've got more centers than you need. And there are other players on the team who can play center. So there's some real depth in this roster, and it is an intimidating roster to play against. Now on the blue line, you got Morrissey, Trouba, Myers, Bufflin are your top four. Sherratt's going to get his share of minutes as well. Had a good playoff. And has developed more into a solid defenseman. Initially, when he came in, it seemed more of just that tough guy kind of role, but he's evolved his game enough that he's adapted enough to the NHL level now that, yeah, he's an NHL level defenseman. Goaltending gives me pause. Hellebuck is your starter, no question. He can be Vezina level, absolutely. Brossoit or Comrie? The backup question. Laurent Brossoit did not have a very good season with Edmonton. That's why Edmonton was more than willing to give him up. I don't think Edmonton fought to keep him. I don't think they made him an offer. Brossoit had a rough year. Now, Brossoit can bounce back from that. And in Winnipeg, he'll definitely get his chance. And you only need a guy who can play 20 games. But are they going to end up with Brossoit, or is Comrie finally going to win an NHL job, forcing Brossoit down to the American League? Because I think Brossoit would clear waivers regardless. So this will be interesting to see how that turns out with the backup spot. Additions, Brossoit, as mentioned, Seth Griffith, Everberg, Kerdiles has been added as well. And that's how it's pronounced in the NHL Guide and Record Book. Kerdiles. So I'm like, oh, okay, Kerdiles it is. He came over. He's still technically a rookie. Maybe he steps into a spot vacated by Armia when Armia was moved to Montreal. So, again, that's just random speculation from me. But when Winnipeg brings somebody in, they'll give him a chance. He'll get a shot at the lineup. As stated, they made the playoffs this past year and got to the third round. They made the first round in 2015 and got swept by Anaheim. And that was painful. That, and I know for Winnipeg Jets fans, that series, if you watched it, is a painful one to bring up, so I'll just drop it at that. Potential rookies, Brendan Lemieux could provide some sandpaper in this bottom nine this year. They're very anxious to see what he can do. Kerdiles, as I mentioned, and Tucker Poolman. So we're talking about defensemen. Poolman looked pretty good for them. And I don't even have Saku Niku in here. And Niku could absolutely end up getting himself a spot on the roster. There's a lot of depth on this blue line. And I think that with the depth this team has at every spot, except I would argue goaltending is a little spotty after the starter. But honestly, if they need to find a backup, there's always teams that have a third goaltender that will be a suitable backup somewhere else. So where did the channel have them? Well, 62.9% of the channel said first. 25.6% of the channel said second. 8.9% said third. So 8 or 9 out of 100 say, well, they played really well, but I think they'll end up being third, which means Nashville, St. Louis, Winnipeg, for the most part. 1% say fourth, and then it's 0.3% for fifth through seventh. So very few votes for fifth through seventh. And of course, you can't vote eighth because there's only 7 teams in the Central. Personally, myself, I have them at first. I agree with 62.9% of the channel in that I really think that Winnipeg is the best team in the division. I think they showed that against Nashville, and I know Pekka Rinne takes a lot of flack for the way that series turned out, and that's justifiable, I believe. But at the same time, Winnipeg was just the better team. I think that we're in for another long run with a whiteout this year, and I would not be surprised to see these guys win a Stanley Cup next year. And it would be a good story. The one thing about Winnipeg that we can say is that it might be the one Canadian team that could win a Stanley Cup that I think most Canadians would be okay with. If Toronto wins a Stanley Cup, there'll be parts of Canada that just, aren't happy about that. Montreal, definitely. You've already got 25. Leave us alone. Well, it's 24 they've got. Anyways. So Montreal would make people happy. Vancouver, there's a lot of people who don't like Vancouver. Same with Edmonton. And Calgary, there's, Edmonton doesn't like Calgary. And there's people in Vancouver who wouldn't like Calgary. I think Ottawa, Stanley Cup, there'd be bewilderment, really. But Winnipeg is a team that I think 90% of hockey fans in Canada would be happy to see win. I think that most of us would be very happy to see them win. I rallied behind them a bit in the playoffs this past year because it felt like something was happening. And then Vegas took place. And they gave Vegas a pretty good push. Yes, Vegas did take them out in 5. But, it was a good series. And Vegas was just on this massive run. Marc-Andre Fleury was on a massive run. And Winnipeg did the best they could with it. And that's my honest opinion of it. It's going to be interesting to see if they can build on it. Because now, for the first time ever, Winnipeg has pressure. There's pressure now to get better. It's not just going to be, yay, we're happy. We got 110 points this year. Yay. It's going to be, okay, we got 110 points. Now we got to win the Stanley Cup. So there's pressure there, and we'll see how they respond. And I personally think they're going to respond well. And when it comes to Stanley Cup predictions, I would not be surprised now if they won the 2019 Stanley Cup, proving Hockey News right, and they'll crow about that and should if that happens. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through and you just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.